Well, finally we have some good weather, so we're going to go in there and pull the honey supers. Hopefully they've dried them out, and return some cappings to the hives and see what's going on inside. Remember, like and subscribe. It's really important to us. Thank you. The thing about working when there's not a honey flow on is you have to be very careful you don't incite robbing, especially if you're opening up the hives and exposing potentially raw honey. Hopefully there wasn't any. Hopefully they cleaned the frames off. Fairly dried off. But still, you want to work at a very consistent and fast pace, not to the point where you're, freaking out the bees. And you want to keep as many things covered as possible. So, we'll pull the super off of this one, we'll put the frames in it, and we'll cover them over so that we minimize the opportunity for other hives to say, hey, here's some open honey, let's go get it. So, after a week of being on the hive after the extraction, they've totally dried out the cells, and that's kind of what we want in order to put them in storage. These supers will then end up in mothballs. Literally, they're stacked up, and we put mothballs in the top of them to prevent the wax moths from eating the frames up. And, ants can still get in there, so you don't want, a lot of sugar to attract ants. One potential problem is you'll run into a few frames that still have a little honey, capped honey, in them. This is where robbing can actually be an asset. We move the frames away from the hives that have some cappings still in there, and we let the bees come and tear the cappings off and take the honey back to their hives. It's a tricky balance, but if all the hives have open honey in them, there's a little bit less chance that one hive will go after the other because they'll be busy working on their own hive. However, the honey that's just left wide open, frames that are left wide open, they'll readily go over and rob out. That kind of helps because you want the frames dry when they go into storage. It is something you want to minimize, though. The less crazed they are, the less chance something weird is going to happen. And also, anything that's open, it also feeds the yellow jackets, which are very pesky this year, as well as hornets. I want to feed the bees. I don't want to feed the yellow jackets and hornets, and they'll come around to open frames and get on them as well. You can see here that once I have a free super, I'll take one of the outer covers, drop it on the ground, put the super there, and then put another outer cover on top of it, to keep the yellow jackets, hornets, and bees under control. When I get another one, I'll just keep stacking them there. What I want to do now is I want to basically get the bees off of the inner cover, and we'll just put a brick on this for now and come back a little later to start doing the feed, which I have a nice pile of cappings that are slightly soaked in honey, and that's the first thing I'm going to feed back to the bees. Smoke is the word of the day. I'll go through a lot of smoker fuel today. One, to really smoke out the supers before I try to take the frames out. And two, you're compacting bees into a smaller section of hive, so they're going to want to boil to the top of it, and you're going to have to keep smoking them down so that there's a little bit of clearance to put the lid back on without squishing too many. I'm only going to cover this process on a couple of hives. We did it to all of the hives, but, it gets a little monotonous. It's the same routine. Take the frames out, examine them, see if there's any honey left on them, and if there is, we put it out for robbing, and if there isn't, then we'll put it in the empty supers for mothballs. A couple of cells in this one. Put this out for a rob out. Now when there's just a few cells in there that still have a little honey in them, I'll put them out for a general rob out. I actually repaired a couple of the cells. Generally, they don't think of this as being part of their hive, but you never know. Occasionally some cells are missed in extraction, and if you leave these guys out, robber bees will come out and they'll rip those cells open and clean them out pretty fast. Not many, but you know, you do get them. It may seem a little rough the way I am banging off the inner covers, but it actually aggravates them a lot less than the brush does. A quick firm action doesn't seem to disturb the bees too much. We saw that when we went in with a nail gun to re-nail some of the frames while the hive was full of bees. They're sturdy little suckers. I've never seen situations where pounding them off like that or shaking them out of a tree caused a problem. So it isn't that I'm trying to be mean to the bees, but you do have to clear them off the cover, or when you crush the cover back on there, you're going to be killing a lot of them. So the next stage involves putting on a feeder frame and a top box. And the idea being here is we're going to come back and feed these guys. But for now I'm just going to prep them. I have a nice juicy pile of cappings for them to have a little bit later. So we'll start by taking that off. Putting this guy on, and this feeder frame just allows any food to sit on it, so it's not sitting on the comb. And this is going to provide some space up top for us to put feed. Come on, girls. I have a no squish rule, or at least I try not to. So the feed will then fit between those two. Now I'm just throwing this guy on, but it really doesn't serve any purpose at this point. So if you think things were crazy before, this is going to take it to a whole nother level. We're about to open up a batch of capping wax to feed back to these guys. And this is going to be really tricky, because if I don't operate fast, I'm going to be covered in bees. So for several days after the extraction, I have the cappings in a cheesecloth over a bucket, and we try to drain out as much of the wet honey as possible. But by its very nature, there's still a lot of honey mixed in with the cappings. Who better to get it sorted out than the bees themselves? That fast there on top of it. They can smell this is good stuff. You girls hungry? Oh yeah. You can see them, they're on top of it already. And I can't even leave the top off because they'll be after it that fast. So, in about a week, I come back and we'll start putting regular feed on there. They're gonna have a blast cleaning the cappings out, and since it's inside the hive, oh, that's an interesting little one. It's a dragonfly that came and ate a honeybee. Dragonflies aren't too cool. They'll steal your queens. If a queen goes out in a mating flight, sometimes a dragonfly will take her. In any case, There's some cells in here that have a bit of honey in them. Before I put them on mothballs, I'll let these guys rob them out. Since each of the hives has a lot of open capping inside the hives, I don't think we'll have too much of a problem with one hive robbing another because they're all kind of in the same circumstance right now. A frenzy. So, until next week, from Buzz Park, goodbye.